As a first and maybe most difficult question, what are we doing with it now? We're not doing a congress just to be happily go home. But a congress is also laying of a foundation for the next step. Just like with our first congress, Avanti, we founded then the WMM. So when we created a space amongst the physicians with that, and now with the topic of love in psychiatry, we have true psychology and also psycholysis, the third cornerstone of Avantis, with this congress added and celebrated. And we stood up for that. Also the question, what will you do with it, isn't it? What will you do it in your life, in your environment, there, where you are at home? It doesn't always have to be thought so big. That's also nice, but that develops in the way that it starts where you live, where you're in connection, in relationship. That you take this question, I hope you already have it with you, that the question gets renewed and you go home and ask yourself, what can this still change in my life or in my relationships or in my therapies? What is my task now? Or maybe also, what has it done with you now? Can you hear me? Yes. I would have two comments. On the one side, I was impressed, Danièle, when you were telling about Timon, that he comes back from school or from his work training and they said they don't want me to be autistic anymore. This really hit me. I work in a school and I have a lot to do with special children, and you're in a very strict system where again and again you still have that pressure to form the kids somehow so they fit society. And this has really impressed me, especially the children, to look that my task is that this should not happen. I have to really look that the kids are not ready for become ready for the system, but that the kids, that I protect them and be their representatives to show they can be as they are. So this has, for my work and personally. And the second comment came to me yesterday. In the afternoon, it was very touching for me. The account by Deborah, it has really touched me. It has really affected me, and also Andreas and Manfred. And I also found that pretty tense. And while listening, the idea came, what you are reporting about diagnosis is how society handles what Deborah was talking about. So basically, and the idea came to me, these diagnostics, I think it's important, and I'm not a professional, maybe you need it, but somehow I found yesterday you need it, so in order to pay you. So you have to get paid for your work, and for that you need these diagnoses for the health insurance so that you can get remunerated. What Deborah was talking about was actually something that cannot be paid by money, love and sharing. And how do you can pay for love? It's actually a dilemma which just doesn't come together. So there's a love, and you want to love and heal. That was also clear when, and we could feel it with Kasia's talk, that you actually want to love and heal, and you have that intention. But the system wherein you have to get paid, I thought that was pretty dire and difficult. I don't know how you could solve that, but it's an immense dilemma for people who are actually there with a motive and with their love in an economic system, and they have to work in an economic system. So those were my thoughts yesterday. I think that's a very, very important point, because I've looked at that for over 30 years now, that the main thing is to love, but I'm not selling love. The love everybody can receive love from me, but because it takes a lot of time in my life, and because it's my job, I have to sell the time. I would also like to do everything without money, but then I would have to have another job, which I actually had initially when I was a pedagogue. But then the problem was that more and more I had to work on the level of psychology or counsel people, have conversations with people, and suddenly I realized I don't have time for my job anymore, because I'm passionately would like to do the other, but I have to live off something. And then there was this topic, well, I can't have 1,000 friends that I want to see every week, and or 500 or 100, not even. And then this discussion came, so much I can work in my job, this time I have to sell. And can't go into depth about it, but these are also good processes to show maybe the client doesn't give everything either, and friendship is only if the other person also gives everything, if I'm giving everything. So there were quite exciting processes that I have to separate, but I'm not selling my compassion or my love, it's always there. But if somebody takes my time, if I don't have any more free time to give, then this time has to be paid for. Or with my son, since he gets a daily allowance from the insurance, he's 20 years old, it has made a lot of progress that he's not dependent on me anymore, but has his own money and he can live off that. But I also discussed a lot with him about it. I always told him, look, you're not really handicapped, you're just special, you're different, but you're able to do a lot of things, and a lot of things that aren't being appreciated or honored or don't have so much value in society. And so he told me a few times, and others autistic people have told me, in this world, in the world that is now present, I am handicapped. The world the way it is, I can't keep up, and I'm perceived as handicapped, and also I perceive myself as handicapped, and the world would need to be different so that I would not feel handicapped anymore. more quiet, slower, more looking into the needs of the individual. Yesterday, something came to me at your talk. I thought I've always been feeling diagnoses are something terrible. I used to think I always felt like a traitor when I had to formulate a diagnosis as betrayal to the patients. And yesterday, I realized how terrible diagnoses are without love. But if love is there, then diagnoses are something very simple and practical. They come from a survey of people, how many people there are, and a description on how I can talk to a colleague and say, he has these symptoms. So if diagnoses have their proper place, then it can be quite okay. But it needs you need to know what they're good for and what they're not good for. So they're not the love, and they're not, and explain not why somebody is the way he is, and also not how to help him, but they describe something, and that can be practical if you use it properly. And especially for us parents, they are absolutely needed. We're not getting any help or support. As long as there's not in school, not financially, we're left so alone that these diagnoses are needed. And they help that at least there is a little compensation or a little extra support, or that something can be financed. Was my son, who actually has finished his apprenticeship, but he couldn't finish it, so that he financially becomes independent from me, and that does a lot for him, and it would have been unthinkable without diagnoses. You can separate it. I think there are different levels. Karen asked me yesterday, well, where is the love now? And I think I'm neither for nor against diagnoses or medical treatments, but the attitude plays a big role. Is it about the patient or is it about me? And often I observe it's not about the patient, it's about the system or the health insurances, the invalidity insurance and so on, and you have to clear that for yourself. I would only give a diagnosis if it really helps the patient. So it needs a diagnosis for the invalidity insurance or disability insurance. So it shouldn't be for his disadvantage that I do something where he's stigmatized or has other disadvantages. So you can also explain many things. A diagnosis is always defined about illness, but actually it's something quite different. That, for example, in non-neurotypical things like autism, high sensibility, is that people cannot be different. They are just that way. And illness is a different level. For example, ADHS people come and I explain there's a diagnosis, you want to have medication and you need it, and then you need a diagnosis. I see it the same way. It's like an interface on a special to the world, or the first contact. People come into a practice with certain symptoms and they want an explanation, and it explains something, how it works, how their psyche functions, But you can't stop there with this normal type of treatment, but you have to go further. What's behind it? What's in the deep, their soul, their being? But I think to have a starting point, or for certain health insurance issues, or also when they need an initial medication or a medical treatment, then you can build the contact and go on from there. So if they and the environment can't cope with it anymore, for example, our kids, we have clarified that with our children at a later time because we managed with them during the community and the field, how we handled them and were able to handle them. We were able to hold a lot and handle a lot. But then there was a point where it was unavoidable that they had to face with society and also with themselves that they are not fitting in, and the demands that they had taken from society, that they just couldn't fulfill them from themselves, and it was something for themselves and also for us somehow helpful that one has my name, and of course I say, look, you're not that, but this is part of your life, a difficulty, and it has also brought certain relief so that you can put it into words and into terms and in contact with the world, because otherwise the world is, oh, badly raised, aggressive, withdrawn, funny, strange, that you can say, no, it's autistic, or it's so or so. It makes it a bit easier.
Ja.
I'd like to come back to the initial question and just share what I am taking along for myself as an affected person with experience in psychiatry and also as a caregiver and nurse. First thing that the whole Congress has really confirmed and strengthened me in an attitude that I had already, but sometimes I felt a bit insecure as well. So I wanted to say a big thank you to you to find this encouragement and strengthening. And for me, it became clear there are different aspects. On the one hand, love. That love to me means touching on different levels, just like Kasia said in her first talk, made it so clear. It really confirmed and strengthened me that I can be touched as a nurse, that it's such a good thing. And I wish so very much that I'm in a changing point. I've been working on an intensive ward, and now I'm changing into a psychiatric setting, and I hope that I have a team there where I can allow that, where we can discuss it, what touches us. There I can see a big advantage and gain if you can do that in a team. But on the other hand, also touching physically, which as a nurse I've experienced that this physical closeness does so good. And I'm so happy that I've always done this until now, just from my intuition, and was encouraged here that this is correct. And so it shows me love in psychiatry needs so much courage. It needs courage to live that, courage to show it, and it really strengthens my conviction to do that also in psychiatry now. And another aspect which I personally take from my personal experience, but also from Deborah's presentation, that love means a lot of compassion, and not to be preoccupied or have a previous opinion about the one across from me, and that I can allow to feel what universe is there sitting in front of me. That means a lot, and it means love. And I think then it doesn't necessarily need a diagnosis. And I've had this question, why do we need diagnoses? I have a good friend and we talked about it together. And for us it was, well, just for the system it needs diagnoses. For example, for me, it helped me when I finally can put a name on what I had. It was a post-traumatic issue. But this diagnosis, it wasn't important. It would have been enough if somebody would have said, well, or if together with my therapist I can work out that have experienced complex traumata. Only that is important. And what a diagnosis or what word you use doesn't have any relevance to me, but just to understand what has happened to me. And I'd like to bring a question which has concerned me a lot. Yesterday you said, if I understood it right, autism, for example, is also a very strong cause genetically. And there's this idea, the transgeneration trauma, and I had this question, could it be that these people, these beings that come to us and have this picture, these symptoms, that they're just carrier of transgenerational trauma, and that have taken up this task in this life to actually work on that and to heal it in certain ways. So, in the sense that each and every diagnosis is actually an expression of a traumata, or it would be interesting to hear what you have to say about it. First of all, it's a phenomenon. One knows about it. One talks about it. There is research, but it hasn't really found an entrance into diagnostics. You have to think there is things outside to describe diagnoses. In my experience, I've come to know different things. You can't really put it into a box, or you've already put it into a box, but then you get to know other family members, and you can see, oh, you get this idea. When we clear up situations with autism or ADHS, then during the talks we can see with one of the parents, oh, this is where it comes from. You can suddenly see it. Or you talk to the parents and they say, oh, yeah, I was like that as a child. Or the parents, it wasn't so obvious because they didn't have such a screening in school. But you can see suddenly, when you get to know the parents, oh, there are parallels. And I know also the other side, that somebody sitting in front of you and have immense symptoms and attacks of panics, and the parents ensures the child hasn't experienced trauma, and you can look for decades, and finally with 30 or 40 I can finally put it into place. There's stories of persecution, traumatizing during the Second World War, that things have been passed on from there. And that's, I think, is also a factor that goes into self-knowledge, that if somebody really wants to know and researches inside of himself, and the specialists often just shrug their shoulders, and go on, and then maybe the person reads about such topics and say, well, is that a case with me? And that people can answer the question for themselves. Well, yeah, there I feel, for example, the foundation in life is missing, and maybe the family was persecuted and had to flee, and the young child wasn't actually traumatized, him or herself. And I'm always open with people like that to discuss hypotheses like that, and to encourage people to follow up on those questions. And another aspect I find very important that you mentioned yesterday, Danièle, that especially with ADHS, ADHD and autism, that our brain is in a constant evolutionary process, and that there were always special cases, and there are also paths of development where our brain and our abilities, and I thought it very important yesterday, as you said, that we have to ask ourselves much more, that we see it as a cause. Where are we going as humanity? What phenomena are there? How can we create space for that, so that it becomes a motor for our development and not as a disturbance or hindrance? Or also if certain diagnoses become more and more, that we have to ask ourselves, well, what happens to our life conditions? Are they so difficult or disadvantageous to our evolution? So that we can see that as a hint. You said that yesterday. I also see it that way. In a healthy world, then we wouldn't need diagnoses. It wouldn't be important. Maybe this person is a little this direction or that direction, but it doesn't play a role anymore, neither financially nor giving support to the affected people and parents. But to your question, no idea. I can say a half-brother of Timon also has Asperger's syndrome, and I've looked into it very intensively during the last 10 years, and when I read different studies, that many people affected by autism, the parents are engineers, and my grandfather, but what the meaning is this? Oh, he's very good in space imaginations, mathematics, beyond, way above average. But when I'm at home with my father, he's also autistic tendencies. But for me, it's not so important, because I can't do anything with it. I can perceive it. Yeah, it's true. There are the aspects, or his brother also has these tendencies. But so what? I can't put my finger on it, why it's like this or like that. Timon's half-brother is not from my line, but from Samuel's. from the line of his father. So I have a different approach. I'd like to see a whole healthy world where every human being can be the way he is or she is, and where they have room. And I think it is important with nutrition and environmental causes and traumata and all that. I think it's important when you can research that and see things that seem to make sense. But I also think it's important not to get too involved in this, because last not least, the person I live with or comes into therapy with me, he can't do so much with it. He just needs that I can be with him as a being that he is or she is, and that there is a need, and that is that I and you and the world could be the way that he doesn't have to feel handicapped or she doesn't have to feel handicapped, but that they are accepted for the way they are and supported with their qualities. And with highly sensitive people, or HDS or autistic affected people, Asperger I'm more familiar with, it's quite obvious what kind of special abilities they have, so that you see those and can help them with that, and you can do this very, very well, but here and there you're not quite sufficient. I think about these type of questions a lot, and I understand it, that at certain, for example, certain indicators, and if this comes together too strong in a human being, then maybe he has these abilities or disabilities, but that's traumatizing is something independent from that. Of course, people who are affected by autism or people with ADHS, there are studies, they experience traumatizing because rejection from the environment, or they get into more difficult situations. For example, was the case with me. My mother told me about a situation where I was 3 years old, and I looked outside the window, and suddenly I was outside and knocked from the outside. I must have climbed up the ladders, and there was a scaffold, and she was shocked. But that says two things. On one, I had a very strong urge to move and have movement, and well, I didn't have any borders or limits, and to keep this apart is very difficult. I mostly can see. At the same time, there are abilities and gifts that these people have, without any doubt. With HD and autism, there's always a one-sidedness. You can do something, one special thing very, very well, that you can have a task to do something. Or for me, with my relatives, there is an HDS syndrome, and I can feel it when I have to do with them. Most of them can play different instruments, several instruments. They've never learned music notes. They've taught themselves, and that's very typical for HDSS. And they can't handle with school and something you're supposed to learn, or musical notes you're supposed to learn. They just do it. It's a special way of being in the world, and in olden days it wouldn't have been a problem at all. But the problem is the world we have that you have to learn certain things that you don't even need. You sit in school and a child that's affected looks around, what's the matter? Maybe what the neighbor's doing is much more interesting. And that's how it starts. And then, oh, I've only looked here and there. What happened? These are the type of problems, and if you understand that better, you can keep it apart. This is an environmental influence, and this is what people bring with them. Special traits and abilities. I like to work with people affected by autism. Also many people who at least touch the autistic spectrum, as I do, and I honor very much what they do. And I also think that HDSS don't have a personality disorder, but that it's a disorder in society. When I ask friends who touch this spectrum, what is 2 plus 2? Nobody will say 4. They'd rather say 2 plus 2 is a full Mini Cooper. So it's a different perspective there. And just because the world of their feelings is different, they get rejected. I don't think it's a diagnosis or it's a handicap, but it's a gain. None of us could get up in our world and live the way we live, and at night some software controls the heating and the coffee machine and etc. And we all want that. But many people have worked that still works, and at least half these people are such that touch the spectrum. And just to honor these people, what they are actually doing for us all. And I also really like to be with people affected by autism, because I find that being together puts me into a different perspective, into a different state. I have to get very quiet inside, very open and very attentive, and I really, really like that.
Can I try? Okay, I will try. Help. But I think that the diagnosis is something that where you take this in the treatment, because maybe you can, in some cases, you can be negligent when you don't do it, and I think that the problem is when your self is separated that what you can. It's an environment problem. It's not a personal problem, and you need. I think about it like a diagnosis is a social diagnosis. It's not just personal, because even the autism or the others illness or way of living, when ourselves is separated, that what you can about your life, about your body, about yourself, you are illness. Illness is not a kind of personality, but it's a political problem. I don't know if you understand me, but I can give one example. When I'm here, my patients call me, and I'm here. And she won't kill herself, and she listens voices and voila. And what I do? Okay, I'm here. What I can do? I can say, oh, it's a dangerous problem. I don't know what the diagnosis. It's never happened yet, and I need to do something. It's not about the diagnosis, but if I think, oh, okay, oh, I can wait. I can't wait. It's so one kind of diagnosis that produce something very precise things that you do. My daughter has one problem, but she's lost in her life, and I don't know what life I can say. Oh, okay, it's good to live. I don't know. I don't think so. I agree with her. But he is entering one kind of the addiction. And what the limit to use some substance and the addiction? What the limit? And I think that I have many colleagues that work with me, and we are militant in the anti-manicomial, and we agree with this. And but I think this is one problem when we are in this field, that we are negligent. What the limit to do it? And okay, you need something about it or no? And the last thing that I want to say is it's what did the illness ask to the society? For example, when our child wants to die, it's our problem. It's a societal problem. What kind of society produce children that won't die? It's our diagnosis. It's a diagnosis of the way of life that we live.
Not only, I think it's important, this aspect. I'm for it, and that we look at it. Why can't we create a world where these people can be and find a space? But when I live with these people, I can see it is also a personal thing. Challenge. For me, health is... I always have to get involved in that. I have it also in me. This not being able to live or being different, or the special qualities, and on other levels I don't seem to be quite compatible with society. But I think there has to be a balance, so they arrive with something. Health I experience as a strength, with something that is here, something that I can handle with what is here, even if it's not healthy or not perfect yet. Maybe not during puberty. People who are there more sensitive or special need a bit longer, and they need more strength in order to put it in the right direction, and often they have more passion and strength. I would look at it when they're 30, but I think if somebody all their lives doesn't get along with society and life, then it also has something to do with them personally. Not as a mistake, but as a disability or a weakness at least. As a a deficiency in the way the world is now, and to be able to handle that. And at the same time, I find it very important to also see we also have some responsibility as a society to also bring something more healthy for these people, that they bring something healthy also, that they need and demand something that makes us more healthy when we are looking at it, but also that they also bring something that where they need more support. I don't want to focus on healthy and ill. I look at it more closely, but from a distance. It's actually also diagnostics to actually see where, why, or to recognize why that somebody is different and how he is different or she is different. So you could see a diagnosis and formulate it in a way, and then it's very important for us, especially in therapy or also as a pedagogical person, in each space where you formulate that you're saying it's about recognition and recognizing where somebody has fallen out of love. And of course that happens on a lot deeper level than the level of diagnosis or what we understand by diagnosis, and it goes much further. So that's important, especially as a therapist. To answer your question, yes, diagnostics are important. When you ask, what can I do with a patient who listens to voices? And what I do with a patient like that, for here in Europe, that's diagnostic. To look at what is it all about, where is she in life, where has she become lost, what does she need, can I do something? That's also diagnostic. So it needs diagnostic to answer these kind of questions. But of course it's diagnostic in a completely different sense. The way we have to see it from a medical point of view. And you can also find and discover the diagnosis again anew. And I've also struggled with diagnosis as a young adult. In spite of all these special high sensibility or being different, I wanted to be healthy, and I think for me I have to find a way how to live with it and not become a victim and not a society that doesn't have space for me, which has more quietness and stillness and more space. But even if society doesn't have a space yet for me it was a motivation to really become healthy and be all healthy, that I can insist on these qualities, that it's not an illness, but it's a quality, and I come with it, but I can handle it within the world, but I can also use it, even when I get older, more mature. But I use these to move the world into a direction that I feel is good for the world. I can't change myself. So if you practice self-knowledge, it becomes more and more clear you can't change yourself, but what you can do is you can change conditions outside. You can have a different goal, that the own qualities. You can find a strategical aim, like a warrior. that you lead a life where this comes more and becomes more unfolded. And I think that's very important. And their diagnostic is also important, that you can help people to exactly see what potential there is in myself. And what we haven't talked about yet is, of course, you can perceive reality directly without diagnostics. And we learn that. That's a process of self-recognition, that you see more and more reality, but that you see everything. Also, where somebody is possibly handicapped or can't make any progress, that I don't have pictures in my head how things have to be, certain models or morals. This person is like that, and they have a disability, and it comes up in therapy, and so this just runs apart and makes a different direction. He sees things differently. He recognizes things that others don't recognize. And in the therapy room there was somebody, you have to set it up exactly like the way it was last time, and I didn't even notice it. It started, okay, move things around the way it was last time, the same angle and everything. And when my spectacles were a bit off balance, he noticed it right away, and it was a big disturbance. So if in therapy things like that came up, it says something, and you have to look into it. I could just say, oh, she's crazy and has a disturbance, but this is where I become interested. What is it? Why is it like that? Explain it. How is it in your life, and how does your life work? And this is how I perceive it. And if in the end you call it autism, or they have a certain compulsive behavior, but the most important is to be able to help a person to understand him or herself.
I just want to say one thing, not what it is, but how it funciona, how it works. Not what is it, but how it works. It's so important.
I think diagnostics, I try to, I'm sorry. But I think it's important in this society to make the spaces so Deborah comes say. We need this kind of research to open space to the difference, but with the society, look for one people who is different, and don't push up this person to do something she's not do. We didn't need that kind of evaluation in my point of view. We need this because we needed to put people in some box, and we want to the people produce some things specifically. And in your society to live, you need to get money by only one. Obviously, have many professional, many ways, but what's important is how you produce it and how you come back to the system. But the important is the people first, so how you can contribute, how you want to live and stay here with us, with a community. I saw this so much in other kinds of communities, like the Indians, with I have proximity, because it's other logical of see the words. So we are like a family. So I couldn't do that because I don't have abilities for do that, but I don't need, because I can do what I can do. And this is enough, because people love me and I love these people. And it's another kind of organization. So it's about this. It's about a society we need to diagnosticate to open spaces so people can be what they are. I think so.
Also, zu deiner Frage noch vom Anfang.
To answer your question in the beginning, what came to me very much that with the Congress we laid a foundation stone, that you can talk about it, that you can look at all these topics which are partly taboo, psychiatry or diagnosis of disabilities, where people often fall into a black hole. I'm at the end of my medical studies, and what Tasha explained, I experienced myself, especially in psychiatry. My fellow students have a lot of fear, and at the same time know very little about it. And I realized if we had an internship, this where you really saw patients and were able to talk to them, they were always very, very exciting, because people suddenly started talking about themselves and got out of themselves. And when I did the glossary and have gone through all the diagnoses, every single topic, every single diagnosis, everybody has a bit of madness and a bit of HDS, and the diagnosis is just that it's a special expressive form of it. But if we find an understanding how each of these tendencies, that these tendencies are also in us, and that we can talk with others about it, so other people also find an understanding that somebody who has HDS or is schizophrenic or has a certain compulsion, then it's not a taboo anymore or something you have to shut out or be afraid of, but something that you find understanding within yourself. And I think that's very important, to just talk about it and also to discuss the topic with people who've never had anything to do with it. I wanted to touch another topic. You, Danièle, said you wanted to get along in the world as a young woman and find your path. And you explained that in the beginning, you didn't want to be a physician or study medicine, and others saw it for you, but you didn't want to see it. And also, what you're doing in Brazil, there's a connection. Isn't it also a therapeutic work to help people where they are, to see their path of life, their way in life? That many people, myself also, maybe it wasn't medicine, but it was psychotherapy. I had a resistance there when I recognized that. But almost every human being needs some help from outside. And can your work, maybe with ayahuasca or with art, or can that help so people can recognize themselves and find their way of life and see that what they have to do in life and what makes them happy?
I think that when we look at this, sometimes we make the separation, but like Danièle said, it's mixture, and if we don't think in the way of life, we can't discuss on this from my point of view. Because, for example, in Brazil, after the pandemic, you have a Rivotril. It's most than the other medicines that you use there. Rivotril, I don't know. and it's a political problem too. And when you propose this kind of therapy, psychotherapy or therapy, we think our sensibility is something so political. The sadness is a political thing. when we are sad, I can govern. I can manage your life. You are sad. It's about me, and the same time it's about the way of we lived, and I think that we are the way that we lived. Because this, I think that this community and the way that you propose, you aren't victims. You can produce what you, it's about it that I think, and that we want and we produce there, and but we need together made some political things too. I think that we need stopped to react of the criticals and say to the world what we do, affirm our way of life, affirmated our way of life. I think it's the way. I forgot some words that oh my God, how I forgot this. The way. I think that it's next to psychiatry. It's the same that I listen you say, but it's not one thing and another thing. It's the same thing. I think that when you take care with another, we take care of their families and then all their environment. When somebody connected with what he can't, what they can, I think that they proposed one way of lived, and I think that when we are take care with another people, we are psychiatrists or psychologists. We are somebody that can walk together, but the people is specialists in themselves, and I'm a specialist in the other things, and we can need this knowledge. I don't know if I ask your question, but I think that we do it in our work, because this Isabela is architect. It's not a therapist, but she is a therapist. And maybe the dog is a therapist too, sometimes. And we have in French one experiment, I don't know if you know, Fernand Deligny. Fernand Deligny, agora eu misturei tudo. He is a pedagogist and a psychologist, and he works with autism in one farm, and we are with most autism there in France, and they are many people work with these child, but no one is a health professional, no one. It's just cooking and tipo jardineiro, gardener, somebody, persons, and they live together and produce some kind of clinical, and it's effective because we follow what the child propose and follow and take care and follow and take care, and it's the work that they made there.
I think what Juliana wanna say too is we can't just reactive to the system, but look for other research to use. So in now this moment we will have some research that's common to use, like diagnostic, like medicines, and it's very common. We go first to this way, but we will have other things and the other research in the relationships. So you look after the case, look after the family, look after you can be to change the way of life of these people. How change this relationship? I don't know. Sorry. The relationships in your life, and this investigation, I think, is a good way in the system. Not definitely, because of course, some cases you need this all the research, but happy ways. We have ways.
We have the water bags and the stones. It's true.
Yeah.
It makes something with us. I use this with my patients, and it's so strong work.
Was findet ihr dazu?
So, what do you think about it? Do you all want to say something? What moves you in regards to this, or what you'd like to contribute? So what brought me initially to this Congress and moved me beforehand is the question about the community in which we live, which is in some ways a psychological community, and why each and every one individual landed here. Doris and I talked about it some more. These dark spots that everybody has to investigate, and that at this Congress it did me well to relieve these borders between psychiatry as a building, a complex, something separated, and us. So that could come in my dark sides, and so I don't have to go into a clinic, but I'm lucky to live here. And I thought it was really good. I've told you personally, Andreas, that in your talk you also mentioned those sides, and I think that's something that makes this Congress of Physicians special. Not just to stand there with the shining sides, but also your own shadows can come out, and that's something that gives courage, and it also brings about something in me that's already dormant there as a vision, that it doesn't need these separations, and that it becomes more normal to live with what is everywhere, and at the same time where is what needed. Not about an individual diagnosis and get locked up in life, but to be integrated in life.
Okay, jetzt. Also mir geht so die ganze Zeit einfach.
What I've been feeling the whole time, and it's going through my head, home, as a term, or as a situation, or as a state or condition, that what I feel, what is needed. If I want to take up your question again, and now, it's stuck with me, and I not quite answered in my mind. Of course it's more of a question, but what involves me the most is to find home, or create home. First of all with the families, the children, in relationships, but also in the community. And I'd like to come back to what you said, Kasia, in the very beginning, what it is all about, and which is also a part of this movement, and what's behind it, or is part of it, that we create a space where people who come or who fall out of the normal system or out of society, that they can find a home.
Das hat mich
So this has
gepackt irgendwie oder beschäftigt.
grabbed me or occupied me.
Ganz umfassend. Also eben,
Just
ich,
all in all,
dann zu
for
Hause,
me, myself, home, family,
sein kann,
relationships, that everyone can be the way they are and live
was er leben muss. Und
what he has to live or she has to live, but also beyond that, that it can happen all by itself, that community happens or a clinic gets home. So what moves me is we are a psychotherapeutic spiritual society or community, and just the life together, as you mentioned, Caroline, it's also a very important factor for all of us, for our personal diagnoses, that we have an environment. In Tamara it's called the healing biotope, that we live here and create this space, and that concerns me a lot. I'm particularly thinking about a very new client. She's very young still, where it's very difficult to find a place for her. But she would maybe fit into Rosenthal, but that we could do something in Ettingen, that they would find a place as a guest, that she could look for a while and orientate themselves or live here, but not in a psychiatric institution, but just this step in between psychiatry to community. That would be something that's a great longing or wish from my side.
Also was bei mir so bewirkt hat, die Tage, das geht so ein bisschen.
What happened with me these days, I've asked myself,
Habe ich genug Leidenschaft?
do I have enough passion
Immer
with this?
alles für die Liebe zu geben?
Always give everything for love, not just in the work, but also in relationships, everywhere I am, with everything I do, and I realized, no, there is still more potential. And I think it's always good to ask yourself that question, where do I stand? Is there more that I can do? Is it good? Is there movement where I can go along? Some movement that strengthens me, as you said. But there are also very concrete steps that I can see in my life. For example, the work. There's a discrepancy between what I do, what's demanded of me, and actually my convictions. I see myself as something who is trying to let somebody else be themselves or become themselves. That's my passion, and I piece by piece have to give up again and again, and it strengthened me to follow that again, because that's my conviction. Everyone should be able to be themselves. I'm very thankful that I've been here to be able to spend the time with you. Have perceived the people, the community, as very honest and warm and hearty, and now I'm all excited because since I looked at the stage, there's a picture of imbalance. The community sits in beautiful chairs, and the guests who've traveled from long ways sit on discomfortable stools, and I just felt I had to express that.
It's good for me. I like it. I like it too. Maybe before
I'm okay with that. Just to let you know, our places are sometimes also quite uncomfortable in our, wherever we have to work in our praxis, where we sit most of the time, are not that comfortable.
Könnt ihr mal tauschen mit Ihnen beiden? Können Sie mal aufs Sofa lassen?
Ja, ja, wenn es die Christina erlaubt. Das hatte nämlich mit der brasilianischen Erde zu tun.
Du meinst die Brasilianer? Nein, das hatte mit der Erde zu tun.
Oh, you were talking about the Brazilians. Oh, this was that because of the chairs not getting dirty from the Brazilian earth. So that's why they sit on those chairs. No question. I wanted to say something to Karin, what you said. Danièle has said it in her contribution. You have to first become ill with your specialties and get a diagnosis, and then you get help. And my experience is young people also need a process like that to recognize for themselves, I'm ill. I've had offers for different young people, and I've asked around the society, the community, is there a place to work or live? And they said, well, yes, as if they had a choice and could still see maybe there's something better. And then they need, not all of them, but need the step to really fall to the ground, fall flat on their faces, and I can't help myself, I grab the straw. And that's my experience with young people. There has to be a balance, I also thought, between home and to care, and also to being left alone and being left with the loneliness that everyone has and that they have to work through. But it is true. What you said, I also experience with young or not so young people. But also the opposite, that many young or just people that don't belong into a clinic, but they need a protected space where people have an understanding for them and for what they need. And the family systems it's too much for them, they're overloaded, and it would be good for them to get out and go into the world. And there are very few places for that, which aren't just clinics. There are some very good projects with other countries or ships, but for that you need about 5 diagnoses and handicapped or invalidity insurance before you get into all this mill. These places are. We're also looking for those again and again, also for clients, and I think it's quite difficult that somebody can be there at home for a while, outside his normal environment, but somehow the humans have these specialties that can also demand it or set borderlines. So it is a problem.
Das heißt, zum Schluss landen wir wieder bei der Vision.
So in the end we arrive at the vision again, and there are also very concrete projects and things in Germany. There's a wonderful project where you don't need a diagnosis. Maybe here too, the Demeter movement. They are training free agricultural experts, and the people are working on the farmyards and working in agriculture and also pedagogy. And there are 3 or 4 years occupied in a wonderful way and receive some money. Well, we're through with our time about. It's very Swiss that we watch the time. Maybe in Brazil not so much, but
I look at for this all the time because
when
I finish this, exactly, it's so difficult. Just 5 minutes, that's okay.
Also wenn jemand noch 5 Minuten braucht.
So if somebody needs another 5 minutes, then they can have the microphone. Or you both.
Okay, dann scheinen wir am Ende.
Okay, then we seem to have come to an end.
Am Ende von diesem
At the end of this meeting,
Kongress.
this congress.
Damit ich nichts vergesse. Genau.
All right.
Zuerst mal natürlich
First of all,
danke. Also,
thank you.
ja, ich bin dankbar. Ich glaube, wir sind
I'm thankful.
wir sind dankbar.
Many of you said they're thankful for this
Ganz
time.
besonders dankbar,
Especially thankful
dass das immer so
I'm
viele gibt, die
that there are always so many
wirklich die Verantwortung übernehmen.
who carry responsibility and help.
Danke der Gemeinschaft.
Thank
Danke auch
you
dem Meisterkurs.
to the community, the masterclass,
Ja,
master
es ist
course.
immer gegen Ende von so einer
It's
Organisation
always
verselbstständigt
at the
sich
end
alles,
of an organization like things find their own lives and everybody does everything what they're doing, and in the end
was und alles klappt.
there is something like this and it all works together and is fitting. Thank you.
Insbesondere natürlich
So especially Technic,
den Musikern,
the musicians,
auch
also
Stellung
for this exhibition,
und natürlich der Küche. Ich
and
glaube,
of course the
sie hören uns,
kitchen.
sie haben
I
alles
think
mitgehört,
they're
was wir hier
hearing
gemacht
us
haben.
and could
Und nebenbei
hear
haben
everything we
wir
discussed,
gekocht.
and at the same time
Hat sondern
they haven't
gezaubert.
just cooked but they've done magic. Thank you.
Ja, thank you. Genau, da draußen ist noch immer der Büchertisch.
Outside there's still the book table,
Das,
and
da gibt's auch die Kongressbücher,
there are
andere
books and also the congress books,
Und
other
das
books,
Kongressbuch von diesem
and the congress book from this
auch
congress
gemacht mit den
will
Vorträgen und allem.
also be put together with all the
Teilnehmer bekommen dann ein Mail,
contributions, and all
direkt
participants receive a mail with a link where you can order this book directly.
Genau, dann gibt es noch
And there
Bilder.
is
Also wir wollen,
the
ich
signs.
habe vorgenommen, wir brechen diesmal den
I
Rekord, weil
think we
wir haben noch
breaking
nie
the
geschafft,
records
alle
this
diese
time.
Bilder
We've
zurückzugeben.
never managed to
Wir
get
sind, glaub ich, so
all
bei
these
70%.
tags back. I think we're at 70, 60, 70%, and Uli would be very impressed if all the
Und dann sind
tags
so
would be returned. There are bowls
Anmeldung,
at the
einfach zurück.
exit or at the registration. If you could just please give them back, we can use them for the next event. That would be super nice.
Im nächsten
The next events,
Also der nächste Kongress ist in
so the
2
next
Jahren
Congress
wieder,
would be in 2 years again,
2023.
June 2023.
Thema, was da so
The
in der
topic
Luft liegt, ist
that's sort of flying around is psycholysis,
intensiv mit
that we
den
intensively
Substanzen und der Therapie
look at the substances and therapy was aided by substances.
Das wird dann,
That's
sobald
sort
es
of an
klar
idea,
ist auf der Homepage,
and as soon as that's clear, that will, the information will be on the Congress homepage. It will be in June 23, and the very next event is a symposium, living together about home in 1 year, from the 4th to the 7th August in 22. So it's also worth, and there are also many encounters with community. It's about community and encountering other communities. And there's also a separate homepage, symposiumlivingtogether.org. .ch, sorry, zusammenleben.
Ja, dann
So then,
hoffe ich, dass ihr inspiriert und
I hope you are inspired and filled, fulfilled, and also with open hearts and open brains are returning home or back into the world, or that you at least keep remembering, in case you forget, the love in all and everything, and the openness and the openness towards special people or who seem to be difficult or strange, that you once again look at it and maybe showed interest what type of people these are. And it's touched me. There's this picture that Celia has painted for the Congress. I think I add that at the end. The world is, we're inspired, and I hope we could be a little light and bring a little light into the world this weekend. But the world is still the way it is, and if you don't find love, then at least you can share with each other what is there, even the loneliness or whatever. The world is large. So, good return home. Thank you.